Hello, good morning. So you've learned how to use VLANs, how to create VLANs, how to assign ports to different VLANs, and how to configure ports to become trunks or access. Now, how about I show you some group of switches like this? There you go. So how are you going to configure that? So what if I ask you to create a VLAN for faculty, a VLAN for student, a VLAN for guest, a VLAN for control panels, a panel, a VLAN for management, etc. So how are you going to deal with that? Quite tricky, right? Looks hectic. It looks like a lot of work. So how are we going to do that? Okay, don't worry because today's topic is about management. Okay, VLAN management. That's what I'm going to teach you today. So, we'll be talking about how to handle these kinds of problems, how to create a group of switches, and then make configuration easier. Okay, so let's start. So, chapter 2 is about scaling VLANs. Okay. So the topic to be covered is of course the VTP, extended VLANs and DTP, troubleshooting multi-VLAN, and layer 3 switching. Today in this video we'll be covering VTP. Okay. So what is VTP? It is actually a trunking protocol. Okay. So we can easily manage these switches, or to be more specific, VLANs on these switches through the use of VTP. Imagine you have one switch to configure, assuming all of those switches I've shown a while ago are or will be getting the same configuration. So you just imagine there's a single switch that you need to configure for you to create the student VLAN, the management VLAN, the faculty VLAN, the guest VLAN, and then everything will follow. Isn't that great? Okay. So BTP works that way. But before we go with creating a BTP server, a BTP client, and making it transparent, so maybe we should go first with the different parts, or at least things you need to configure for the BTP to work. One is the domain. For you to be able to implement the advantages of having a server and clients, they should all, take note, all, they should all be on the same domain, in the same domain. Okay. So advertisement are the updates or VLAN information that are being passed from the server to the clients. Okay. But there are different types of advertisements. We'll be talking about them later. We also have VTP modes. I already mentioned that it can be server, a client, or if you don't want the switch to participate, then set it to transparent. And lastly, we have password. Even if you configure properly the domain, if you don't know the password, then the switch cannot get the advertisement. Okay. So let's look at modes closer. One is server. Okay. I already mentioned the server. The server is the one where you can configure the VLANs. I mean, this is where you create the VLANs, you add, or you can even edit or delete these VLANs using the server. And take note that in the server, all the configuration are saved in the NVRAM. Okay. The next one is the client. It has the same um, properties like the server, except that you cannot create, change, or delete VLANs using the client mode. I'll show it later. And then another thing is configurations are not saved in the NVRAM but only in the RAM. Okay. So as long as the switch is on, the configuration is there. Okay? Don't worry because there are advertisements that are being sent by the server. In any case, something happened to the switch. And if you don't want the switch to participate in any of those activities, then most probably you want to configure it to be transparent. Okay. Um, just take note that you can also create VLANs, delete VLANs using transparent mode, but all of those activities are just locally known. Okay, meaning it will not affect other switches. So if you want a certain switch to be doing its own business, then maybe you should consider setting its mode to transparent. Okay. So these are some common questions. So I decided to uh, give you some time here for you to be able to at least pause this later on and then look at the questions like the differences, how it responds to advertisements, etc., etc. Okay. The next slide is the advertisements. So, what is that advertisement? What are those advertisements? So, one is the summary advertisements. Okay. So, it already shows there in the slide that it's basically the main name and configurations. It doesn't have the VLAN information yet coming from the server. Take note of that. So once advertisements are being passed, then it will it will be sent to all ports that are considered trunk, okay, trunk ports, and then pass through different clients, even if it's um, transparent or its client. So take note that transparent forwards advertisements. So once advertisement is received by a certain switch, then comes a response. Okay, that switch will ask then from the server about the different VLAN information that are to be configured for that switch, as it is the client. Okay, it should receive advertisements about um, VLAN informations. So after replying to the server will then send the subset advertisements. And then all the configuration will be sent to the requesting switch, and then it will copy all the revisions from the server. So if in any case that a client the version of the client is slower than the version of the server, it will always request for advertisement request. Okay, it will send the advertisement request. That's how it works. So there are the BTP versions. So the default BTP mode on all switches is, of course, the version 1. So I'll let you pause this for a while and then um, look at the differences. Okay, so how to configure? Well, I'll give you an actual configuration later, but let's run through the different commands. Let's start with the show command, which is the show VTP status. Sometimes you want to look at the version, monitor the version. If the client is copying or getting advertisements, you want to look at the domain name, the pruning mode, drops generation, device ID, etc. Then you just show VTP status. Okay. And then some rules you need to know about VTP. So to reset VTP configuration, maybe you'll be asking later on, sir, what if I want to reset the VTP revision to 0? There are two ways. Okay. One is you change the switches VTP domain to non-existent, meaning any other name that are not that's not the same as the domain being used by the clients, and then it will be reset back to 0. After that, you go back, yeah, you switch back to the same domain name. Okay. Another way is you put it to transparent first, and then after that you put it back to the previous mode, if it's a server or if it's a client. So again, um, let's look at the other status. So VTP mode server, that's the way you do it if you want to configure a server. In VTP mode client, okay, for the client, VTP mode transparent for the transparent. I think we should go with the configuration already. Uh, Let me pull out the packet tracer. Okay, so let's create a new, no, don't save. So let's create a simple topology of, let's say, 4 switches. So I'll be connecting the first and the second switch to G01. This second one to G02. And then the third one using G01 for there. So let me show you how to create the VTP first. So CLI, then enable, okay, configure terminal, then VTP mode. There you go. So you have client, server, and transparent. Assuming I have here a client. So after that, or maybe I should set the VTP mode to server here. Server. Okay. And then I'll create a VLAN later. How about I configure this other switch first to um client, and then I have here the third switch. I'll be configuring this to VTP mode is transparent. So then lastly, I'll be configuring this switch to mode is client. Okay, so let's label the switches. This is the server, and then this is a client, and then this is transparent, and lastly we have a client. So assuming we have this kind of setup, so what to expect? So with this kind of setup, we are here to expect that this server will be the switch where we configure everything. And then after that, all advertisement will be sent here. This will ask for a request and then copy. The server will send the copy to copy of the configuration to the client. The transparent doesn't really care. Okay, it will not get any configuration, but it will forward the advertisement sent by the server. So aside from this client, this another client will also receive the same advertisement and also will also request from the server, and then the server will reply back, okay, from the response, and then um, it will send the same advertisement to the client. So that is supposed to be how it works. Okay. So if I configure here VTP VLAN 10, name is faculty. So it is expected, supposed to be, that this client will have the same VLAN. So if I do show VLAN, then it should display the VLANs. But take note, it doesn't get any advertisement yet. Why? Actually, there are problems. One, we did not set any domain yet. They are supposed to be on the same domain to get the advertisement. Another is we haven't configured these ports to be trunk yet. So let's start with doing the domain or creating the domain. So BTP domain is, let's say, Cisco. Okay. And then BTP password is 1234. Note 1234. So I should put the same here, the same domain. BTP mode, BTP domain is Cisco and BTP pass is 1234. Okay, I'll do the same here. I'll do the same. BTP mode, domain is Cisco. BTP password is 1234. And lastly, here, BTP domain is Cisco. BTP password is 1234. So we're done with the uh, domain configuration. Take note that this will not copy at BTP. Do show VLAN brief. So it doesn't have the expected VLAN yet. It only have this. Okay, VLAN 1. Why? Because the switches port is not yet configured to um, trunk. So remember G01 are supposed to be configured to trunk. So interface G001, switch port mode is trunk. And then let's go here. Interface G02 once. Then switch port mode is trunk. Since we're already here, I forgot to include G02. So interface G02, switch port mode is trunk. Let's go here and configure 2 and 1. Interface range G01 to G02 and switch port mode is trunk. So there, interface G01 here. Interface G01, switch port mode is trunk. Okay, now let's wait for the amber color there to become green. And let's check the configuration. I think this part here is already good. So let's check the VLAN. Do show VLAN brief. So there you go. We have VLAN 10 already and we have the faculty. So how about this? Do show VLAN brief. So it doesn't have because as expected, it is a transparent switch. Then lastly, we have here uh, do show VLAN brief. Then we have the faculty. So if I am to configure here VLAN 20, take note or just look at what will happen. So it will tell us that VTP VLAN configuration is not allowed when device is in client mode. Okay. So let's go back to the server and add more VLAN. VLAN 20, name is management. VLAN 30, name is student. And VLAN 40, name is guest. So it is expected that all of these VLANs will also reflect here. So if I'm going to issue the same command, do show VLAN brief, then we already have guest, student, management, and faculty in this um, switch. So there you go. That's how VLAN works. So any questions you have, you may post them in the comment. So thank you very much for listening.